We have a flag this time. Right. Scott, would you like to lead us? Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, we will begin with the roll call.
Representative Campbell. Here. Representative McCauley.
Here.
And Representative Gomez is absent. Representative Madden. Here. Representative Farmer.
Here.
Representative Leubitz. Here. Representative Brazzoni.
Here,
Representative Nichols. Here. Representative Chair Leubitz.
Here. Right. Beth, under AB 2449, you have an opportunity to attend the meeting remotely. So if you want to give your statement now.
thank you. I'm appearing remotely today due to a temporary medical condition, and I'm the only one in the room. There is no one over the age of 18 in my office with me.
Right, thank you. So we will now move on to the approval of the agenda, and there is going to be one change which we need to vote on, and that is item number 9. We are going to pull off of the agenda, and we're going to discuss that at a special meeting to be announced. I believe that the members of the MAC have been briefed on it. So if there's any discussion about that, any members like to make any
I
comment?
have a question.
Sure.
Is this going to be a special meeting of the MAC, or is it going to be a special meeting like the ones about fences and trees and others?
Okay, for the chair, if I may.
Yes.
So the plan is to hold a special meeting of the MAC, but sort of run it more as a town hall style format. So we're planning on consulting with the chair to figure out how best to make this happen. We do want to make sure that all members of the MAC can participate, which is why it needs to be a noticed meeting of the MAC. We plan to work with the chair on the format. And the idea would be not just to discuss sort of this parcel specific zoning piece, but to allow Permit Sonoma staff an opportunity to present their responses to the other meetings that we've had. So it would also include agriculture, vegetation management, and sort of anything else that might potentially go back before the board for a decision. So it would be a full discussion with, sort of participation from members of the public, and we plan to work with the chair on location and format.
Okay, thanks.
And we're anticipating it happening the second week of budget hearings, but we don't have sort of a specific date and time, which is I think the 3rd week in June. I can look that up on my calendar, but it would be sort of the second half of June, and we can work on a time that is agreeable to the chair and that we feel like would maximize participation for members of the public.
And would that be an in-person meeting?
Yes. With hopefully a hybrid option for folks to be able to call in.
Right, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, we need to approve that change. And we need to do a roll call for that.
Everything tonight will be roll call because Beth is.
Because that is, okay,
And do you want to do public comment?
all right, is there any comments on the change? Right? Okay. Sure.
Does the change involve a discussion of the trail that is proposed to be routed through our area? It does not. I'm asking the question
Oh,
out of ignorance.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't know.
The only connection would be the site specific, and I don't think it's stated specifically in
I
that.
don't think it's in the
So no.
LCP. So
So the answer is no.
no.
That's correct.
Can I address that? Is this a LCP related trail?
there are some businesses, I think in the Cove area that obtusely might be referred to as trail access. But,
Okay. So then it would come up in this special meeting, correct? It potentially we could be addressed.
What trail are you talking about?
I mean, it's, the discussion's open.
There's a proposed coastal trail. It's gonna go through Ocean Cove and the campground or up to the park or something. It's gonna go across our place somewhere. It's gotta be, yes.
Yes, and thank you, Scott, for elaborating on that.
I don't know what it says, but it's certainly a legitimate thing to bring up. Right?
Certainly.
So that's something we could definitely discuss at the meeting in June, but it wasn't even agendized for this meeting, so the agenda decision won't
Right.
affect our discussion of that. But it's something you also bring up like during my report or during general public comments if it's something you want them to hear tonight.
To get that right.
So that it is, I have a hearing problem, please bear with me. So what I'm hearing, I think, is that it is a legitimate part of the discussion today. No.
Actually, it's not part of this agenda because we're moving an agenda item to the future, but when that future item is heard.
Thank you.
It's that time.
Thank you.
And additionally, we do have public comment on matters not on the agenda, and so you could actually speak to it if you want to make a sort of testimony tonight at that item.
Thank you. And for our chair here, when is the right time to make those comments?
I will ask for public comments a little later in the evening.
Thank you.
That will be relatively soon though.
Thank you.
Okay, so is there any other public comments about the change in the agenda? Seeing none, is there?
Brian, I
Yes.
think if we're trying to stick with the maximization of the fact that we're trying for the hybrid, I should check with the online.
Yes, sorry.
Sure. So just from a process standpoint, if you're joining us from Zoom and you would like to submit public comment, you may press the raise the hand function on the application itself. Nobody has phoned in, but if there are phone-in attendees, they can press *9 during the public comment period to raise their hand, and then I can recognize you and you'll have the time to speak. If you have technical issues, you can email me directly at leo.chyi@sonoma-county.org, and I'll put that into the chat for the online attendees. At this time, if there's any online attendees who'd like to comment, please raise your hand. This is about the agenda finalization. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so Chair, I believe you can proceed at this time.
Right, so, okay, so we have a motion to proceed, and we have a second.
Second.
Okay, Drew seconds. Okay, so roll call, Debbie?
Representative Campbell. Yes. Representative McCauley.
Yes.
Representative Madden.
Yes.
Representative Farmer.
Aye.
Representative Leubitz.
Yes.
Representative Brissoni.
Yes.
Representative Nichols
Yes.
and Chair Leubitz.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so on our consent agenda, we just have our minutes. I know there were some suggested changes for those minutes. Marty, did you? bring those
Yeah,
up?
I found some misspelled names and I've sent them in separately to Debbie and she's gonna take care of it. So
All right, so did that change will be made. Did anybody else have any change for the minutes? Scott?
Yeah, on page 3, offshore energy. Add that it was stated that the California Coastal Commission has final determinative say where the greater good is considered. That was brought up. It is in our interest to remain in this conversation if that happens.
So it's.
With page 3,
Uh-huh.
offshore energy. You know what, page 3 for me, I was going by my.
Oh,
So.
oh, there it is, offshore energy, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
just that it also reflects that the coastal commission has final determination based on the greater good. And our participation should be nurtured to stay in the conversation. That was stated. And it was also stated that we support sustainable alternative energy deployment. And but we are interested in, if the Data Bay were chosen to be in the conversation about the impact.
Great. Scott, can you also, when you have a chance, email Debbie?
I'll write it up.
Right, that would be very helpful. I'm taking notes.
Thank you. Okay, so with those changes, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Okay, second. All right, so Debbie, if you need to go through it again.
Yes, Representative Campbell.
Aye.
Representative McCollum.
Yes.
Representative Madden.
Yes.
Representative Farmer.
Aye.
Representative Lippett.
Yes.
Representative Brazoni.
Yes.
Representative Nichols.
Yes.
And Chair Leubitz.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the statements of conflict of interest. Does anybody have a conflict, any members of the MAC have a conflict of interest?
We just asked, the IOLERO is a presentation only, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing none, we will move on. All right, so let's go ahead and we will do the presentation from the Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach.
Hi, would you like to or
Sure, whatever works best for you.
And have you been able to get online?
no?
Okay, sorry.
But I did notice that the PowerPoint
Yes,
is in the agenda.
it is.
You go through each slide, but it's quite short.
Right.
We can speak to it. What would be best for you?
I will give you the password so that you can, I'm gonna write it down for you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Leo might have just messaged the, yeah.
Yeah. Better.
The online people, we're getting some passwords set up so you can do the presentation.
Also, if you're online, the PowerPoint slides are in the on the website in a yeah. There we go.
Debbie, we set that. Now I see what you're going. Good evening. My name is John Alden. I'm the director of IOLERO, which is a mouthful. The Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach. And I am pleased to be here. Thanks, Supervisor, for inviting me. Appreciate it. And this is my first time here at the Sonoma County Coast Municipal Advisory Council, and there's a lot I don't know yet. And there's probably a lot you haven't heard about IOLERO. So hopefully we'll have a good conversation. You can ask me whatever you like. I'm gonna try to leave some time for questions. As you can figure out from the name, outreach, part of our job is outreach, and it's about a variety of things. I'm going to talk about some of those. I'll talk a little bit about myself, a little bit about how the office formed, for those of you that might not know it. For those of you that follow Measure P, which was a recent ballot measure about our office, I'll talk a little bit about that, and about some of the things we're looking forward to the next couple of years. And again, I really like to hear from you, so this is a dialogue. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time, and throw your hand up if that's okay with your procedural rules, and I'd be happy to engage. That's right. So again, my name is John Alden, and I've been the director of IOLERO just for this last year, since September of last year. I am originally an attorney, trying to be a recovering attorney, and I got my start as an attorney as a prosecutor here in Sonoma County, actually, at the Sonoma District Attorney's Office. And I kind of hoped that I might get a permanent job there. I had one of those temporary jobs that people were out for various reasons, medical leave and parental leave and military leave, scooting by one another. And then I had this competition for a permanent job, and I lost out on the permanent job when my colleagues kind of live on. And so my turn was like, Carla totally took my job. But now she's your DA, so I think that actually worked out a lot better for you. Because I think she would be better at that job than I would. So after that, I was in district attorney in Marin County for a little bit, and then was in private practice, which was also in Sonoma County for a firm in Santa Rosa for a while. But part of my career is probably most relevant to you is that since 2009, I've been doing police and law enforcement oversight. Some of that was in San Francisco, the San Francisco Police Department, in several different capacities. And some of that was with the city of Oakland and the Oakland Police Department, running a civilian oversight program they had there. So when this opportunity came up, I was excited about it for a couple of reasons. One, that I already had familiarity with Sonoma County and really have appreciated this county a lot. And but then on top of that, Sonoma County's current system for providing feedback to the sheriff's office about their performance is a cutting edge model statewide for sheriff oversight. And I think a lot of people in Sonoma County don't realize that this county has actually led the way in the entire state, particularly for a general law county like this one, on how it is that we provide feedback to sheriffs. And I think that's something Sonoma County should be proud of. So I was very excited to come here and be part of that project. So what is it exactly that we do and why do we do it? Well, this is our mission. We were given this mission several years back in 2015, 2016, 2017, were founded for 8 years. And the main reason that we were founded was because of community response to the death of Andy Lopez. How many of you remember the death of Andy Lopez? You're good. So, as you know, that was a shooting that happened with sheriff's deputies, and the community was extraordinarily upset about that death. And coming out of that tragedy, the county put together a group called CAE, which was a task force of community members, including people in law enforcement, to discuss how we could put together some kind of oversight system for the sheriff's office to make sure that there was better communication between the community and the sheriff's office about community expectations for how they police this county. And the first director started in 2016 for IOLERO. CAE put together the idea of IOLERO. That was approved by the board of supervisors by ordinance, and it started operating in 2016, 2017. In about 2020, a ballot measure went forward. The community put it together. COVID happened while signature gathering was going on. So then those folks in the community brought it to the board. And the board, I appreciate this very much. The board decided to put that on the ballot. And that measure expanded some of the powers of IOLERO and solidified exactly what the funding would be, and clarified some issues that had come up in the first 4 or 5 years, resolved some conflicts that happened in the county about how exactly IOLERO did its job. So very long story short, right now in 2023, we're in a place where this is one of the longest standing oversight programs of the sheriff's office in California. It also has some of the clearest powers. There's some state law that's changed since IOLERO was formed as well that makes our powers even clearer. And our general job as a result of all of those grants of authority from the board of supervisors, from the state, from the voters here in Sonoma County, is to strengthen the relationship between the sheriff's office and the community it serves. And we do that through outreach, through engagement with you all, and promotion of greater transparency with respect to law enforcement operations, specifically what the sheriff's office does when they're out on patrol. So when they're coming through here in your community and providing patrol services to you, but also with respect to what happens at the jail, which, as you can imagine, is a notoriously opaque kind of facility by nature of jails and prisons. It's very hard for the public to know what's going on inside of them. So we're trying to create more transparency there. One of our goals as we're working on greater transparency with respect to law enforcement operations is also to help you understand what kind of accountability is going on inside the sheriff's office. Now, for that reason, one of IOLERO's primary functions is to review complaints that come in about sheriff's office personnel or about policies for that matter, and then send those over to the Internal Affairs Division of the Sheriff's Office, where they're investigated by sheriff's personnel, and then we review that investigation and provide feedback about it. That's the lion's share of our day-to-day work. We call that an audit, meaning we're double checking the work that's been done in the sheriff's office. Because of Measure P, that 2020 ballot measure I mentioned earlier, there are also a very small number of cases that we can directly investigate ourselves, say by interviewing the witnesses directly, or taking a look at what evidence there might be out there about the case directly, and coming up with an independent opinion or in parallel to the sheriff's office opinion. Again, it's a very small number of cases, and we're just starting to do that work now in 2023. As a result of that work, and also through a group called our Community Advisory Council, which is a group of people kind of like this body, who are members of the community appointed by the board to participate. We put together recommendations to the sheriff's office about how we think their policies could change or be improved or be updated. And we try to do that with robust public feedback. So it really is a mechanism for the public to be talking to the sheriff's office and with the sheriff's office, two-way communication about why the sheriff's office does what it does, how they do it, and also to see whether or not that really meets community expectations. And sometimes when we have those conversations, we're able to figure out ways to bring in best practices from other locations, or to help the public better understand why the sheriff does what it does, which might lead to greater legitimacy for the sheriff's office and public size, or help the sheriff's office understand that some of the things they've been doing in the past don't meet public expectation. Might have met the expectations of some people inside the sheriff's office, but maybe they're not meeting the expectations of you all out here in the public, in which case perhaps they need to change better meet your expectations. This is an ordinance we have that talks about some of our powers. It's kind of lengthy, which is why it's in the agenda. I'm not going to read it. So one of the reasons I put this up here is because IOLERO is specifically tailored to meet expectations of some county residents. As I mentioned before, the IA task force created the idea, the board of supervisors finalized and refined that. We made that into a statute. We had Measure P that came from the public and from the board. It was passed by the voters that further refined it. So it's really designed to meet Sonoma County expectations. And that is, I think, an important part of our model. And the reason I say that is because I'm also a part of a group called NACOL, the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. It's a coalition of other organizations like ours, like IOLERO, and also community groups that are interested in police oversight. They make recommendations about how you might want to structure your own oversight model. And one of the important parts of their recommendations to everybody in the country is make sure your model matches local concern. And so the fact that our model grew out of a very specific local concern about the death of Eddie Lopez and the ideas of Measure P means we're really responsive to community. In addition to that, IOLERO has another facet that NACOL recommends, which is independence. At IOLERO, none of us work for the sheriff's office. I'm a separate and distinct department head from the sheriff, or from the district attorney, or from the county council. I report to the board, just like many other department heads do, except the ones who are elected, like the district attorney and the sheriff. And so in that regard, we're not bound by any decisions the sheriff makes. We also have full access to material at the sheriff's office. We can look through all the same material that they're looking. So when we're auditing one of their cases, it's really important to us that we look at exactly the same material they looked at. And in fact, we can give them feedback about whether we think they looked at all the material they ought to have looked at. So we'll tell them whether we think their investigations are improved. And let's say, hey, you should also look over here at this other information, do that in your thought process. And so because of that, of being tailored specifically to the community, because of that independence, because of that access to information, I think we're able to do actually a very high quality job. Using these powers, every year we come up with an annual report. I put a few of them back here on the back counter if anyone wants to take some home. They're also available at our website, which is on the county website. We do one every year detailing these audits I just described and the policy recommendations that are made. One of the things that we're working on right now is seeing how the sheriff's office is doing with the set of new state laws. It calls for something called de-escalation. De-escalation means, pardon me, that when sheriff's deputies are in a situation in the field and in the public, or even in the jail, where they might have to use force on someone, state law now calls upon them to do more than just the federal constitutional minimum of making sure that that force is quote unquote reasonable. A lot of dispute about how one defines that term in this context. But that said, state law here in California now requires officers, including our sheriff's deputies, to go one step further and proactively look for ways to calm the situation down before they use force. That's the core idea behind de-escalation. And so one of the things we've been working with the sheriff's office on recently is a series of policy recommendations that came out in 2021 from our office and our community advisory council, giving the sheriff's office some feedback about how we think they should incorporate de-escalation into their day-to-day thought process about use of force. And then we're following up with them this year about how their training and the policies they developed do or don't follow up on those recommendations. So we can make sure we're all doing our utmost here in the county of Sonoma to avoid de-escalation. As a general rule, our hope is that de-escalation is going to make the public safer because there'll be less need for use of force. But also, sorry, I gotta get some water. Thanks.
Maybe under the. Margaret, you know where?
Last week it was a sniffle, this week it's cough. Getting used to spring. Thanks very much. So our hope with de-escalation, statewide, but also here in Sonoma County, is that by employing de-escalation principle, we will keep the public safer because we'll be left need for deputies to use force, but also keep deputies safer because of situations that they confront. And now have more tools to keep those calm, slow them down, have more opportunity for more resources to come to the fore, try to resolve the situations peacefully. In other communities that have worked on this kind of de-escalation, we have seen reduction in injuries to the public. We've seen reductions in fatal uses of force. We've seen reductions in deputy injuries, and that also results, on top of all the other things, on savings to the local government, because then you don't have to pay out quite as much for your employees being injured, right? So those are some of the policy ideas that we are working on. It's important to note, though, that IOLERO does have some limitations. We are not a substitute for management at the sheriff's office. We do not have the power to discipline anyone inside the sheriff's office. The state constitution is pretty clear that in a general law county like Sonoma and in most counties, that power lies solely with the sheriff. So a lot of our power is really about persuasion. In that regard, it's important for us to develop a strong relationship, at least to be able to have good dialogue with the sheriff, even if we don't always agree about our ideas. One reason that I decided to take this job at this time was that we now have a new sheriff. And I have been really pleased at how open he's been to talking to me, to staff at IOLERO, and also to our community advisory council. We had a retreat with our community advisory council in February to figure out what issues they might want to work on for the next year. And for the first time so far as I know, in the history of our county, the sheriff actually came to the CSC meeting and spent a good hour with them, talking about what his priorities were, their priorities were, and reaching some understandings about some things to hold on to this year. That's part of why de-escalation is on the menu for us to continue to talk about this year. In addition to hiring practices with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, how that affects culture internally, and how those things marry up with trying to make de-escalation part of the culture inside the Sheriff's Office. So I think while some of the limitations we have in the law are significant, it does create motivation for everybody who's involved to have dialogue, to make sure it's public, people can understand better what's going on. I think that's actually creating some change in the Sheriff's Office. Our community advisory council meetings that I was mentioning earlier are available online in the same way that this meeting is. So if you can't get there in person, you can tune in and watch. Like your meetings here at the Municipal Advisory Council, they're hybrid right now. And then in addition to that, all the past meetings are online if you want to look back through some of their work in the past. Policy recommendations the CAC has made in the past are online too, if you want to take a look at those. And we're finally this year starting to get responses from the Sheriff's Office in writing about their thoughts on those. So that's been encouraging too, because increasingly you start to see those. Also, when you go to our website, in addition to these materials I just mentioned, policy recommendations, annual report, we are just this year starting to release a complete record of certain of our audits. There was a change in state law just a couple of years ago that allowed us to, and actually go further than that, requires us, meaning the county, requires the county, to make available to the public a very small set of internal affairs cases in all law enforcement agencies, including the Sheriff's Office. And those include officer-involved shootings, and anytime the force is used in such a way that creates great bodily injury. So those kinds of cases, you can now see almost in their entirety on our website and on the Sheriff's website. So there are only 2 up there so far. We'll probably have about a dozen of them up there by the end of the year. You can read through the interviews of the deputies involved, of the members of the public involved, the video of the incident, the rationale of the Sheriff's Office and of IOLERO in reaching the decisions that they did about the case, and what ultimately happened in the case, if anything, that any discipline say was imposed on the officer. And I think that's a great change in state law, and that the more the public understands what's going on in these kinds of cases, I think the more we can reach a place where public and law enforcement are on the same page about this. So that's a lot. In order to make sure we get the word out about all that work, I come to events like this. We table a lot at different events. We're doing some Spanish language radio ads starting this summer to try to reach out to particularly non-language Spanish speakers who we find tend to be a disproportionate portion of our complainants, maybe as a population who don't know about our services as much as others. So I'm eager to see how that works out. If you know anyone who would like us to come by, let us know. This is the email address you can use. Again, that's in the agenda. You can copy it down, and you're always welcome to contact me anytime. I've been talking for a while. I'm sure someone must have a question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm curious about the independent investigations, and it mentions in this page on the ordinances that it's in the opinion of the director. So is that solely at your discretion, or are there criteria for you getting involved independently of the sheriff?
There are some. So one category of cases that we can get involved in and investigate directly are cases that we feel the Sheriff's Office did not investigate completely. And in that case, the question of whether we feel it was investigated completely is ultimately up to the director and their discretion. We are working on a project right now at the Sheriff's Office to better explain to them proactively and in advance what we think completeness means, so that they are better prepared to meet that threshold when they're finishing up their cases. And we're going to make those criteria public this summer once they're done. We're pretty close. We just had another meeting about it this last week. We're not required to agree about that, but I do want to make sure we at IOLERO are making clear to the Sheriff's Office what we think that standard is. And then you'll be able to have a better answer to your question once those are out in public.
Thanks.
In addition to that, there are a couple kinds of cases that we can investigate regardless of the director's discretion, and those include ones in which fatal force is used. And that is not common, but it does happen. Yes, please.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful process. I'd be really interested to know if any of your suggestions have actually have been accepted by the sheriff's department, or are they just engaged in a process that leads to no change ultimately?
Well, for better or for worse, I do think that the record we have from before I came here seems to fairly clearly show that sheriffs previous to the current one didn't appear to respond much or very often to the recommendations, either IOLERO or SCCMAC. And I think that actually became a challenge to the relationship between the sheriff's office and the public. And I think the sheriff's office got a fair bit of negative feedback about not being responsive to those recommendations. Right now, as we're moving forward, I do think that they're very interested in responding to our recommendations. And we've been told that we're going to start getting some letters back and some policy modifications back based on our recommendations. So I'm going to be eager to see how that works this year. And since we do seem to have a better spirit of collaboration this year than we have had in the past, I think that's how they like it.
I would visit that.
Thank you.
I have a question, and maybe it's on the website, and I hadn't had a chance to go look at it, but I was wondering, out of the, I don't know how many sheriffs are employed in the county, but out of that population, how many of them are bilingual or, you know, Spanish speaking?
You know, that's a great question. And I believe they talked about that in their most recent annual report that came out last fall. And I don't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but that does go to a policy conversation with them.
Because obviously communication and being able to engage with the community in their language or understand what is being said when they're in an intense situation, you know, could go a long way.
That's right. And in my opinion, that goes beyond knowing just 5 or 6 phrases in Spanish.
Right.
It goes towards
Immersion, being immersion. Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. And in the state of California, it used to be the case. To be a law enforcement officer of any kind, sheriff's deputy or police officer or warden in jail, you had to either be a citizen of the United States or already have permanent residence status and then have an application pending to become a citizen. So you have to either be a citizen or pretty close. That rule changed effective January of this year, so that one need only have the legal right to work in the United States, which we commonly call a green card. So that opens up the field of law enforcement to a whole set of people that have been excluded previously. That set of people much more likely to be an immigrant from another country and therefore have some language skills, likely to have some language skills other than English. And so the experience so far that other agencies have had in hiring since January 1 has been dramatic diversification by language skill. I sometimes speak at what's called the Regional Training Center, which is a police academy run here in Sonoma County through the SRJC. It's located just outside of Santa Rosa. And they train there recruits for a really wide variety of agencies throughout this county and also some surrounding counties. And they were reporting to me last time I went there that their stats, just for the recruits they were training, went from 5 to 10% or so people who might speak Spanish or some other language to more than 50%. And they credited that entirely to that change in statute. Now here in Sonoma County, we have not yet incorporated that rule into our civil service requirements for sheriff's deputies. And the CAC, we've been having conversations with the sheriff's office about how that might be a good idea. But apparently it's working really well in other communities. And I'm hopeful that down the pipe, we'll see the sheriff's office work with the civil service commission to make that change so we can see increased diversification.
And or provide, you know, intensive language immersion. Training, so that within a year, you speak with the language.
Right, exactly.
I think it's fair to say that we have a good relationship with our resident deputy, just right down the road here. Now, IOLERO is one place a member can submit a complaint. So the first part of my question is, what are the other ways? And the second part is, why might IOLERO be the choice among us?
The two ways to do that would be either to go to IOLERO, which you can do through our website or by calling us on our website, or by mailing or stopping by in person. And the other is to go directly to the sheriff's office, their internal affairs division. They also have a portal on the website which explains how we can make a complaint there. The advantage of making one's complaint to IOLERO is that then we'll be tracking what happens to your complaint and tracking the resulting audit. And we'll be double checking to see if the investigation that we're then auditing is one that is subject to public disclosure or not. And we'll be able to get a letter back to you telling you whether we think what the sheriff's decision is about that case, whether we agree with it and what we recommended instead. In most cases, there are still, unfortunately, some really, from my perspective, dramatic and very limiting rules at state law about how much we can say. So in most cases, you're not going to be able to see, say, the interviews the deputies involved. But on the other hand, you can get some understanding of what happened. It's also an opportunity to have what exactly it is that you're complaining about further crystallized and refined by some people that understand the system. In my experience, in almost every police oversight system, people come to complain. They have had an experience that they felt was negative, and that they have some thought about why that was an unpleasant experience. But they really don't know, most of us don't know, police procedure or training or what it is that a sheriff's deputy has been told to do when they're at the scene, right? So it's hard to know sometimes if the deputy was doing something that really was inappropriate given the rules of the job, or whether what they were doing was just kind of unpleasant, right? Either way, those are important to hear about. But oftentimes at IOLERO, when we're talking to someone who wants to file a complaint, we're better able to help understand what they experienced, and if you will, translate that into language that's more readily understandable by the folks in internal affairs who are going to be investigating it. And that, I think, tends to create greater clarity for the complainant and greater chance that the issues that you care about really are addressed.
We have council member comment.
That's one last thing. The only, I mean, our constable is great, and but when we have complications and we have road closures, and you have deputies and police come from all over, and it's on one of those roadblocks that I've heard the only time that a neighbor was forced to the ground and senior officer calmed it down. So in such a case where you might have people from outside the area, might they come to you?
Yes. Now, one of the things we'll try to figure out is where did that law enforcement officer come from? If they're a sheriff's deputy here in Sonoma County, then we can go through the process I described earlier, having internal affairs investigate and audit the investigation. If they're from some other agency, the best we can do is make sure that that gets to that other agency, or help complaint get to that other agency. Sometimes in situations like the one you described, it's not at all clear to the people who are involved, which officer is from which agency, and we can sometimes help figure that out. We have access to somebody on camera footage and logs about who was assigned where and when, and sometimes track that down. But that is, I think, increasingly a problem in situations where lots of agencies come from outside to provide assistance.
We appreciate it.
Well, exactly, but then, on the other hand, if anybody who's come from some other agency misbehaves, we have to figure out which agency that is and go back to that agency, right? They're not all overseen by the same boss. So that can get a little complicated.
So IOLERO might be a good place to interpret what,
Yes.
way to deal with it.
Exactly.
And Beth?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for coming tonight to speak to us. What part of what I'm hearing you say is that while IOLERO has been set up to help filter complaints and to then look at these complaints and take them to the sheriff's department and do fact checking and help with the processing of these complaints. I'm also hearing that you're helping the public understand procedure, and that you are maybe doing some positive interface with the public, letting them know that that the sheriff's department needs bilingual recruits, that it's okay to work for them, that they're not the enemy. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's true too. There are several challenges that the sheriff's office has right now that I really like to get out to the public. And I was really glad we had a conversation about language access, because I do think that's one of them. We talked about de-escalation. A third we haven't addressed, but I think is equally important, is staffing, particularly in the jail. And that's a complicated topic. I don't want to get too far ahead of anybody on the board about how we're going to resolve that. But I know that requires funding, right? And funding is in short supply, but then in addition to that, it's also hard to recruit people. But I do think it's really important that we try to provide some help and assistance to the sheriff's office in their recruiting efforts. They really do need more people who care about community, have what I like to call a guardian mentality, as opposed to a warrior mentality. You know what I mean? Who really care about protecting the public, both in jail and also in the jail setting, but also on patrol. And so if you know anyone, or you know the place where we could look for folks who would like to be working for the sheriff's department, that would be really welcome. And if you have other thoughts about some of the ideas I talked about earlier, like language access and you're diversifying by changing some of the qualifications to their deputy, that would be a help too. So yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that we can do to, I think, help support the sheriff's office. I do not think that the only job of IOLERO is to.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when a person has a complaint and they go to the sheriff's website, is there a way for them to know about IOLERO? Or is that on the sheriff's website or no? So how does a person find out about this?
I'm not aware of a place on the sheriff's website that directly talks about IOLERO, but our website is part of the county's website.
Sure, but if you're somebody that, you have a complaint, you go to the sheriff's office or to the website and you don't know about it, how would you find out?
That's a great point. How much time to check? Maybe I think that that's something I'm excited about.
And then I have another question.
We have links to his webpage, so I think it's unfair.
Yeah, it should be on the sheriff's website.
That's a really
Yes,
point.
yeah. And then the other question I have is, do you look at all of the complaints or only the ones that the complainant goes to you for?
Well, as a matter of local ordinance under MRP, we do have access to the entire complaint stream. So we could go look through all the complaints that have come in and see if we see patterns or challenges. That said, we're only called upon to audit a certain set, which are the ones that come to us, or another set that are described in the statute, like the officer involved shootings we talked about earlier. Ones that involve violations of the rights of people who are in custody, Fourth Amendment violations, excessive force, a couple of very specific categories. So when you put all those together, it's certainly not the entire complaint stream, but it's a substantial portion of it. And in my opinion, includes all of the kinds of complaints that are the highest, that are about events of highest consequence.
It's just such a breath of fresh air to see to document and understand this point. One suggestion, a question. It would seem to me, not on your side, but on the sheriff's side, whether it's exonerated or sustained, that if excessive use of force, they can take that stuff for them, say resisting arrest, then the scene. That way you can see both sides.
Yeah.
Right now I can only see, for example, in the offer involved shooting, the exonerated case 003, where they've got 9 points of what they fought. And most of the time it says the folks, there's nothing there, it's just exotic.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think that's a great idea. pass it on to the sheriff and suggest they do that. In addition to that, a process we started this most recent year, which you'll see in our next annual report in September or October, is that the sheriff's office now has, we formalized that they have an opportunity to give a written response to each of our audits. You know, if you missed something or misinterpreted, maybe we looked, they didn't understand the applicable policy, or like, they have an opportunity to give us a written response that includes some of those in these reports. So that way you have a sense, at least in some cases, of why the sheriff's office thinks maybe we got it wrong, and then maybe we can have some conversation. So hopefully next time we'll see a little more of that.
The question. One of the biggest questions in reasons for non-compliance and frankly, the detention and abuses tends to be mutual. You know, whether the person being stopped is hot or the officer gets frustrated. But this is an area I think that actually root might help. It's all over online. You know, you sit there and film it. But the lay person doesn't know. And you run from the prison, you have to stop. Right. Did you get out? You could. That's simple. How do you respond in the cases? I think the greater that too many people are concerned about. It's kind of true.
Yeah, and you know, I think that one challenge we have in our society in the current moment is that there are a lot of different opinions about how folks believe police officers and sheriff's deputies should approach members of the public and how they should interact with them. And so each person has their own thought process about that. And so a deputy might take one approach to one person, and that person might respond positively because their expectations have been met. Might take that very same approach to a different person and have a totally different reaction. And in that regard, I think there's some room to be sympathetic to people in law enforcement because the expectations of the public vary tremendously from individuals to individuals. I'll give you a short example. I know I've taken a bit of your time, so I'll try to quick. But our sheriff's office does not, as a matter of policy or practice, particularly prioritize traffic stops for minor traffic violations. So most of the time, that's not their primary assignment. That's a little different for some of the contract templates you want to use it. But in almost every other agency, like police departments, right, they do traffic stops all the time. And I can't tell you the number of people who complain about being told to stay in a car and stopped by a police officer. There is a nearly identical equal number of people who complain about being told to get out of the car. So people get very upset when you're told to stay in the car, they're very upset when you're told to get out of the car. Right, it's exactly that phenomenon. And in most of those cases, those individuals say, well, I thought it was inappropriate that I was ordered to do that. And what many people don't realize is that at least federal constitutional law in the United States says that officers, assuming they made the stop for a reason, they actually saw some of those stops on here. They're like, they have complete discretion to go either way. Those are both equally valid choices constitutionally. And the officer could tell a person to stay in the car or tell them to get out, and we all have to obey either way. A lot of people don't know that, but I did notice the last time I had to renew my driver's license, I had a long video about that I had to go through. And I really appreciated it because it provided really solid direction to members of the public about that rule. And then it further said, if you don't like what happened, the best thing you can do is after it's over, and here's a website you can go to find out how to make a complaint to the agency that stopped you. And I thought that was really solid advice. So those conversations are, other conversations about more complicated topics get pretty hot. But I think that's a conversation you need to have more often. And I'm really glad that we have a community advisory council here in Sonoma County where we can mediate that conversation between the sheriff's office and some members of the public. Sir, and then.
First, I would like to applaud your organization, your mission statement, and your outreach that you have made to us, to this community tonight. That's really important to me. And so congratulations on that. It says a lot about our county, our board of supervisors, etc., our law enforcement, that your agency exists and hopefully has teeth. To that, I want to look to our county board of supervisors to make sure that your organization is being responded to, is being responsive. The sheriff's department is being responsive to the inputs, reasonably responsive. It is, and may I just ask the question, is that your experience? Is our sheriff's department responsive to the complaints or the inputs that we are making, that your organization is making?
They are starting to become responsive this year.
Could you repeat that?
Yes, starting this year.
Okay. All right. I feel that it is important to also say that our history, my experience, a single individual's experience, having been in the community, I live right across the street, for 35 years. Our law enforcement officers, those individuals that have been assigned to our community, have been particularly sensitive, because I mean, that's evidence that our sheriff's department really understands the unique vulnerabilities we have out here in the West County. I mean, we're few and far between. And that law enforcement, with all that brings with it, is very important to us. And so my experience, and this is the plus for our sheriff's department. My experience has been that has been very sensitively handled. The choice that I have determined that the sheriff's department makes a choice of employees that are serving our community. And that choice is in recognition, in part at least, of the special circumstances that we have here. And so again, applause, if you will, or support to the county for, and the sheriff's department for making sure that at least that kind of criteria is exercised. And I think that's it.
Anybody have
One more
any
comments
questions?
and then probably need to wrap up in a few minutes.
It sounds great in terms of, what you're addressing. Obviously, you need to talk about de-escalation, and training goes with that. Hiring that supports, bilingual nature. But culturally within the sheriff's department, it sounds like, you know, the white elephant is that there's racial discrimination. There's, I think there's questions about how people with diminished mental capacity are treated. And I wonder what your group can do about the internal culture. You sort of alluded to the fact that the new sheriff is open to hearing about reflection of their own culture, which is great. But I wonder how else, whether you can help look at these sort of visions.
Well, that's a great question, and it's one of the top priorities of the Community Advisory Council this year. So in our most recent meeting, just a few weeks ago, they heard a presentation from the Sheriff's Office and from Human Resources about how people are recruited as part of that cultural, how the culture is set, I should say. And over the course of the next year, they have a small group of CAC members meeting as an ad hoc committee working on exactly that issue. If you're particularly interested, okay, get in touch with them. But it'll be very interesting to see how we resolve that. It's one reason I mentioned the issue about who's eligible to be a law enforcement officer, because it became clear just from that presentation that that's one of the fundamental issues.
But did you say that Sonoma County still hasn't instituted the fact that you have to be a citizen in order to get that job?
Correct. Some years ago, we put it into our civil service rules because it was a state law. And so we just copied it over.
So what's the holdup?
Well, I think that that's a conversation that we're just now starting to have with the sheriff's office and the civil service commission to see if there is some other reason why they're over there. It's not clear to me why one would delay. I can say that so far from what I know today. So I'm eager to hear more about their thought process for their. You're very welcome.
I echo Frank here, after 16 years on the fire department here, working with our local deputies. In Newton, these people are wonderful, they're highly respected by the bilingual. And this is a small community and everybody knows them and they know everybody. Yeah, unlike, you know, if you're a sheriff deputy in town, dealing with somebody you know, it doesn't happen at all. Out here, it's 100%. And that it's a different culture out here. And you know, I think the sheriff continues to consider that. So we could-
Yeah.
anyway,
I heard him say
We
that,
love
so
it there.
yes, yeah.
We love our sheriff.
We
We
do.
do love our sheriff.
I would like to be sure to thank Supervisor Hopkins for inviting me. And I also want to thank Deputy Leo for helping me bring us up and all the members of the MAC public for listening to me. I know I went on a lot longer. But I really enjoyed the time and if you gave me another hour, we'd be sure. But to take up the rest of your time.
We made it.
Well, sure.
I just want to say it's a really big deal to have a very busy director of a really critical county department and to come all the way up here to Fort Ross School. And so just thank you so much for coming up here. And just so everyone knows, we are extraordinarily lucky to have John in this position. He has just, I think, exceeded all expectations of the Board of Supervisors, hitting the ground running, working collaboratively with the Sheriff's Department, and yet also providing a safe haven. And I have personally referred a couple of cases of folks who were actually victims and didn't feel as though you know, they were treated adequately through an investigation process. And you know, regardless of what happened, for them to actually have a safe haven and a compassionate sort of office to go to, you know, it's a lot harder for someone in that situation to submit a complaint to the sheriff's office when they feel like that is who has wronged them. And so, you know, regardless of the outcome, having that safe haven and having someone who is, you know, extraordinarily intelligent, has this phenomenal career and history in this kind of work, and is also just deeply compassionate, has been really, really great. So he's a huge asset to the community. I just want to say brag a little bit because you're awesome and say thank you for coming up here. I really appreciate it. Former Sheriff Petty, who actually went to the first CAC retreat, and which was something that would never have happened before he took office. So he has really been engaging collaboratively with IOLERO too. And so he's great. We're hoping to have a town hall at some point with Eddie and Carla Rodriguez, our new DA out in West County. So stay tuned for that. So maybe you can come too. We can have like a whole, you know, suite, get the public defender, like have us all there and understand. There we go. And just clarify our jobs. People are always like, think that you do something that you don't do. And so explaining that would be just.
Yes, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So we're gonna check real quick with, if Leo, if you can see if there's anybody on the Zoom who wanted to comment.
If there's anybody online who'd like to comment or ask questions on this item, please raise your hand now. For the phone-in person, you're welcome to hit *9, which raises your hand in the system.
Like I say, it's now our job to get the word out that this is an opportunity.
Great.
It should be on the sheriff's website too.
Yeah.
And then our website.
This is the benefit of engagement. You guys can make some mind up. They do.
Thank you.
We're all set.
Okay, great. All right, well, that was excellent. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, so moving on to our chair and council member reports. So does anybody have a council member report?
As follow-up about Hazmat Day in the Sea Ranch, that hasn't happened for a long time. Last month, Mendo Recycle shut down all HHW operations. The City of Ukiah is taking on managing HHW through a new contractor. Zero Waste Management is waiting to see if the Sea Ranch will be included in their services. If not, Zero Waste Management will step up later in the year and start providing services with the Sea Ranch again. There is an event in Bodega Bay very soon. There's also a pilot solar panel recycling project. It's very hard for residents to recycle solar panel. And it's next month. If anyone's interested, you can reach out to Zero Waste Management, or I have the information as well. We've been having compost giveaway events sponsored by Zero Waste Management, the school here. And they've been very popular as all the gardeners, some of the people here picked it up. They bring 40 yards of compost. It's free. It's part of a contract they have. I think it's 12 or 1,800 cubic yards they have access to. If you want to consider this, get in touch with me. I'll set you up. It's not hard. You need to figure out a good place. They also have the availability of delivering sacked compost. We're trying to figure out the needs for the site where it's delivered, but that's being figured out. And that's it.
So any citizen can ask for the 40 yards?
No, it's a community event,
That's a community.
not for your ranch,
All right.
but you can bring your pickup. And we have a loader here and we fill you up until it's gone.
Thank you, sir.
Any other council members have anything they would like? Sure.
Well, just briefly, I'll be attending next Friday at the Sea Otter Summit, I believe on our behalf.
Yes.
I think that was your instigation.
Yes.
Because I opened my mouth last time.
You know, you opened your mouth. You sound confident. You get in trouble.
Anyway, I think that would be a really good session, and if you'd like, I could report back on it.
I think that would be fantastic. Yes, and that is, that's gonna be in next, I believe in Vega Bay.
Yes,
For Vega Bay, and that's, so we are eager to hear more about that, and I know the sea otter stuff and was, we briefly discussed it at our last meeting.
Yeah.
I think there's still a lot of opinions on both sides of that,
Yeah.
that issue. So thank you very much for doing that, Drew. Anybody else?
I have an update.
Beth?
Thank you. I want to thank Supervisors Hopkins and her office for putting together the May 1st LCP meeting at the Yacht Club in Bodega Bay. I think it was a very important meeting. It was lively, that's for sure. But I thought some very good work got done and some good communication. And I just really wanted to make sure that Supervisor Hopkins knew how important it was for that meeting to occur. We still have some things we're working on, as we've discussed earlier, and there's going to be something, another meeting going forward for that. But I did attend. Jill Lippett was there too, I believe, and it was just a good dialogue. Thank you.
All right, and then, Jill, you?
No.
Oh, okay, great. So, to one more thing to close the loop on, an item we had last meeting, which was, the letter regarding the LCP. So I did draft that letter, and I believe that was sent to all the members of the MAC, which was to request an engaged delay, which, Supervisor Hopkins and the board acted upon, and so the LCP is obviously not yet proceeded through. So more, as we discussed earlier, keep an eye out for the discussion and special meeting of the MAC for more on the LCP. If there's not anything else, we'll move on to the public comments. So members from the community can now go ahead and and we also on the Zoom, we'll have an opportunity to speak about anything that's not on the agenda. So if you'd like to discuss anything, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Keep in mind that I'm not going to set a timer, but just please be considerate and make sure that we have enough time for everybody. So
I want to ask, I'm hearing that we're not getting great sound. So rather than making your comment from your chair, if you can come up here, then we can get you on the recording also.
Okay. All right,
So you're asking.
Anybody who has a public.
yes,
comment.
if anybody has a public comment,
Okay.
yes. So do any is there any public
If
comment?
you want to make a public comment, Frank,
Yes,
you come to the podium,
thank you.
better sound.
And so we have a microphone here.
It
That's
should be
right.
right there, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember.
My concern is associated with the trail that is proposed to transit our area here and parts of our community. And that concern precisely is the risk of fire. Certainly the members of this community, and I'm assuming our board of supervisors understand that we are in a particular vulnerability here for the risk of fire and wildfire. Now, how does that concern, which is shared by all of us, how does that concern map into my specific concern about this trail? Like it or not, there will be people associated with those trail walks that will be irresponsible, let's just put it that way, not responsible for their conduct. There is a percentage of the public that will be irresponsible. And now, how does that relate to fire? That relates to the smoker who maybe has the pack of cigarettes, independent of the restrictions that may be on that trail for not lighting cigarettes or so forth. Addicted people will in fact be smoking on those trails and putting or not putting out fully cigarettes and matches. So I really, as an individual, and I'm standing here, I know this may not be appropriate, but I'm standing here representing a number of people who cannot be at this meeting tonight, who have called long distance from out of the country and said, Frank, please articulate our concerns. And so and so I think that I've said enough. I'm fair warning, I'm gonna be involved in this situation. I intend to insert myself into the process as we go along here, but there is a real hazard here. And as a bare minimum, I would expect our county and this MAC board to represent those concerns appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there any other public comment? Leo, is there?
I do see at least 2 hands raised, so anybody else who wants to speak from online, please raise your hand now. Again, the phone caller may press *9. So the first speaker is Norma Jellison, and that's followed by C. Higgins. So Norma, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. You can unmute and go ahead.
Hi. Thank you, Norma Jellison from Bodega Bay. I appreciate the MAC removing item number 9 and moving it to a standalone meeting. Although I must say, I don't understand adding back in ag and vegetation management, which have already been discussed in public meetings. But be that as it may, I'm sorry that the emphasis that has had to be placed on the item about parcel specific policies being removed has detracted from the public, being able to really address with the MAC and going forward to the board, the many LCP deficiencies that exist in addition, like having ESHA maps that don't reflect current technology, not addressing water scarcity on the coast, not addressing the density that we have seen throughout the coast of vacation rentals, as was added to the policies in inland. And it just, you know, the public safety element, the hazards associated with that, flooding, with wildfire. There are many other deficiencies in this current version of the LCP which haven't been addressed. And if we don't halt this going forward, will not be addressed, to the detriment of the coast and the citizens who live at the coast and who visit the coast.
Thank you, Norma. C?
Hello, everyone. Thank you again. I just wanted to thank you and Supervisor Hopkins to reiterate what Norma said, to take this issue on site-specific policies and have a further discussion on it, because I feel that the item was never properly agendized or discussed, or folks invited that could input that would have allowed you to get the full story behind the importance of these policies and their significance, and the need to, yes, to update them, to make them more protective, but certainly by eliminating them, we lose that opportunity. So really appreciate that we're getting that opportunity. Also asking as a member of the public, if there's a way to clarify how a letter from the MAC, how that process works. Is that a matter of a letter, all members of the MAC having to see that letter and vote yes to pass it forward? Or is it just one or two members who send a letter on Coastal MAC stationery saying that that is the opinion of the entire MAC? It's a bit unclear to me how this letter happened in the first place. And I would hope that just to, you know, keep the faith and transparency with the public, that would be something that could be discussed at a future meeting, as I know you can't reply to public comment, but I would hope for clarification on that. And once again, to ask Supervisor Hopkins and the MAC for your support in amending the LCP language around vacation rental programs, because it's just a program, not a policy, to include looking at high concentrations of vacation rentals and how that interferes and impacts and prevents preservation of neighborhood character. And I'm hoping for your support that we see that in the LCP, so that when it comes time to ordinance, it's just a consideration. And so asking for your support with that once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, C. So we can't address the item about, but we will keep that in mind for the next meeting, for the special meeting. So thank you, C. Any other additional public comment? All right, seeing none, I will move on. Supervisor Hopkins.
Great. I will try to keep this short but sweet, but I do have a number of things to cover. You know, I did want to reiterate what I shared earlier about the LCP. Our plan is to have a full-length meeting, and the reason, to Norma's question about why agriculture and vegetation management need to be revisited, it's because at those meetings, staff didn't have language. Well, we kind of had especially on vegetation management, because we had a really positive consensus in the room around what the direction was that we wanted to head in the language. But until we actually have ink on a page, we don't know whether what staff comes up with actually meets the needs, in particular of the North Coast homeowners around defensible space and our firefighting communities up here. So that is why we'll be revisiting that. And we can also revisit the parcel specific zoning at that time. And also in response to Norma's comment about the maps, Unfortunately, the California Coastal Commission does not do GIS or ESRI or anything that makes sense. And so they are literally locked into the Stone Age of like printed out maps. And so we actually have it sort of built into the local coastal plan that when they get to the point of accepting digital maps, that we will at that point, right, of course, have digital maps of ESHA. But the other thing is that, you know, ESHA changes over time, and sorry, ESHA being environmentally sensitive habitat area. And so, you know, the maps are going to be living documents regardless of what happens. And then ultimately, whenever a development goes forward, just as actually happens in inland with respect to surveys for whether it's tiger salamanders or any of the endangered species, you know, flower species that we have, there would need to be a survey conducted by a biologist to determine whether that area is ESHA or not. Okay, I think that sort of covers the LCP. Thank you all so much for postponing that item. I didn't want it to sort of take over this meeting, and I feel like it really deserves its own standalone meeting with staff able there to answer your questions and kind of a thorough deliberation and discussion from members of the public. Wanted to give an update on some of the efforts that we are currently undertaking to support our fishing community. Obviously, the fishing industry in Bodega Bay has been hit extraordinarily hard, and we are seeing a number of fishermen who cannot afford their berthing fees, where they dock their boats in the harbor. And we're also just worried that a lot of these derelict boats are going to wind up sinking to the bottom of the bay, where they then cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to remove, and it's a huge kind of messy process to do that. So Elise has been working with regional park staff, and I actually just touched base a couple of days ago with regional parks director Bert Whitaker to try to move forward with a berth fee waiver for our fishing industry to kind of recognize the challenges that they're facing. In addition to that, we do have a request in, I believe it was Congressman Huffman who carried it, around trying to get multi-million dollars to finally replace the ice machine, which has consumed way too much of the last 6 years of my life. The thing is always on its last legs, and there's always some part that has to be like flown in from across the country because it's so old, like you can't even make the parts anymore. You kind of have to get them like off of eBay or like antique shops. So anyways, it's the ice machine. We're really crossing our fingers that we will get a federal appropriation so we can have a climate resilient, energy efficient ice machine that will enable our fishermen to cool down their wares, and then in turn be able to sell them directly off the boats. That's all something that we've been working with the fishing community on. Also very excited to announce that our Meredith Wharf pier art installation that has completed, and we are going to have some kind of a fun something at some point to celebrate that installation, which, as you recall, we were getting quite a few complaints a few years ago about the fact that that pier was deteriorating. We managed to get a multi-million-dollar allocation from the general fund to remove the pier, and as part of that, also have an art installation that would kind of commemorate the history of the site, despite the fact that we were removing the pier in order to make it safer for everyone. Also wanted to provide an exciting update. There have been a lot of rumors about Chancellor Ranch being bought by the county. I can conclusively say that it has not officially been purchased by the county of Sonoma because and it actually is going to be by the Ag Preservation and Open Space District, because that actually has to take place at a publicly noticed board meeting and be voted on by the full Board of Supervisors. It has appeared on the closed session calendar agenda, in which, you know, the board is able to deliberate around real estate negotiations. I have been involved in conversations with the property owner and the property owner's representative for just over a year now. And so it is certainly the county's, really, the Ag and Open Space District's intent and hope to purchase that property. And I can say that we are currently in contract. However, just like, you know, regular real estate, right? There are contingencies, things could happen, it could fall out. The Board of Supervisors at the last minute, which I really want to hope doesn't happen, could, you know, back out of the deal. But the goal is for that to come before the Board of Supervisors in early July. So it is not official, it is not finalized, and there is a lot of due diligence from the county's perspective taking place. One thing that the property owner, who's a wonderful man, really appreciated the opportunity to get to know him a bit about a year ago when I went out and I just first heard that he was potentially putting the property on the market. He has a request that there be some kind of naming for his mother. And so that is actually part of sort of a deal that we have negotiated. And he also really was very strong, which I also completely agree with, about keeping the horse operation going, because that's a really important benefit to the community. And, you know, and also we also had a lot of conversations about the agricultural use of the site, which is actually referenced in the local coastal plan. you know, that's a really, really critical component going forward. And so, so my hope is for all of that to continue and for that to ultimately become a regional park that is open to members of the public at any point in time. The other benefit of that property is that we know that at some point in the future with sea level rise, Doran Beach will be underwater, and that is currently the most popular regional park campground in all of Sonoma County. And so we need to start looking at places that could potentially host affordable accommodations you know, for families and visitors on the east side of the highway above the potential sea level rise zone. And so, you know, looking obviously thoughtfully at siting constraints and, you know, visual impacts, et cetera, there is a possibility that Chancellor Ranch could host some affordable accommodations, campsites and campgrounds into the future. So that will all be part of like a park master plan process. However, the good news is because the existing use of that site already has had members of the public, right? Using the trails and, you know, on like, we don't have to go through a big master plan just to get folks out on the public land property on existing trails or on the horses. That's already a baseline use like per CEQA. So the good news is it would actually be pretty easy to transition it to like a soft opening of the park and then kind of build out the longer term vision, working closely with the community and with neighbors and everyone who cares about coastal parks. So wanted to provide a set the record straight. We haven't bought it yet. We're crossing our fingers. But it's not going to be official until the board of supervisors votes on it. And then quickly, also want to thank you so much for participating in the Sea Otter Summit. That is at capacity, but we will be recording it. We actually have a professional recording group coming in so that it's something that everyone can watch. And we're hoping we can be able to pull highlights from some of the presentations. We will have tribal leaders. We will have sort of scientists actually from all over the state of California and as far away as British Columbia coming to speak at this event. Economists, and then Jared Huffman is our special guest speaker. So we were hoping to mobilize local, state, and national support for a sea otter reintroduction program that could potentially ultimately benefit our offshore coastal marine ecosystems, in particular our kelp forest rehabilitation, because that apex keystone species is really critical in terms of kelp. And even though there's often fears that like, oh gosh, if you bring in otters, the abalone population is going to go downhill because they do like to eat abalone, or you know they're going to negatively impact the fishery. Studies have actually shown that, believe it or not, positive correlations between abalone population and sea otters, because ultimately sea otters have such a positive effect on the sort of kelp ecosystem itself that getting that healthy actually makes everybody healthy and can actually ultimately lead to an increase in the prey species as well. So we'll learn more at the Sea Otter Summit, and I look forward to being able to report back to the body in the future. Also, Lisa's going to be providing sort of more of a roads update as part of first staff report, but just a quick highlight. I know that everyone sees tons of speeding all the time, and in particular in the community of Bodega, we've had a series of just tragic incidents with property destruction and signs destroyed and cars in businesses, et cetera, et cetera. We have really tried to do everything that we can from the county side, putting in little, you know, rumble strips and have increasing signage. You know, we've also worked with the community to have more sort of like grassrootsy signs installed. We've tried putting up the little signs that, you know, TPW has that are just the simple printouts that talk about, you know, slow down. And it's all sort of very frustrating. I think Elise can say that, you know, it's been an exercise in frustration, and we've also learned a lot through this, which is that if you install a permanent sign, it's effective for how many weeks? 2 weeks, and then people basically ignore it and it becomes part of their background. And then unfortunately, the sort of most recent incident in Bodega was actually the result of someone who was driving without a license, and I believe has actually been sort of prosecuted for sort of the actions that occurred for that. But that said, we are looking at, can we get like one of those signs that is more like the one that you come in when you come into Sebastopol by Burbank, that actually kind of flashes like a cop light and then tells you how fast you're going. That may be the next step in Bodega. And we're also having conversations because right now, 2 out of 3, I think, of our mobile speed signs, because those are effective because you move them around, right? The trailers that have the flashing sort of information with the speedometer on it. 2 out of 3 of them, I think, are broken because of vandalism. And of course, the one remaining is in hot demand. We're kind of thinking about maybe we should get a West County specific one. The city of Sebastopol has one that just says slow down, and it's like a Patrick Amiot sculpture. And so it kind of catches your attention. And so if we get something like that that also has a speedometer, maybe that's something we could keep local in the 5th district and move it around to communities that are complaining. Because the speeding is out of control. It's like after the pandemic, everyone just went, all systems go, don't care about cyclists and pedestrians, like just, I gotta get where I'm going. So anyways, Liz can provide additional information on that and on pavement during her staff report. So happy to answer any questions.
I just have one question on the Chancellor Ranch acquisition. This is, I've heard a rumor, and so this is great to hear that that's in progress. I have one really important request. I think that when the, oftentimes the horses will cross the road in dusk in the evening, and there's so many near major collisions. In fact, there was some accidents there. I would just request that something has to be done about that passageway across Route 1.
Agree wholeheartedly, and when we actually went to the property, I actually talked to Bert Whitaker about that, and we talked about the fact that there would need to be a conversation with Caltrans and probably some kind of actual official crosswalk signage, something lighting up, because, you know, if you are going, it's a good opportunity, right, to connect to the state park across the street.
Correct.
This is fantastic.
It's fantastic.
And yet,
However,
if it's not done well, it's going to lead to really
right, because
bad.
that's a straight way and people go blind and
Yeah.
there are horses and you come upon it in the evening at dusk and they're still riding. Anyway, thank you.
Totally agree. Thank you for flagging that.
Is there any way to get CHP on Highway 1 more? Because I haven't seen them very much at all.
They've all been sitting in bodega.
I used to see them in Jenner, but I don't see them there anymore, and it's weird, people like will go slow on one and then speed through Jenner. And right where the kayak place is, it's an accident waiting to happen. Like you said, people ignore the sign centers, I mean, they're traveling through, but they still ignore it.
Thank you for bringing that up. I actually have a list of things for CHP this week, so I'll put that on there. We have a new captain.
Yeah.
We have a new captain, so. Yeah, if they would just sneak on one of those side roads, occasionally going through Jenner. So people who routinely drive that road can see that they're there some of the time. Because I always obeyed the speed limit because I got a ticket. Like a long time ago, 15 years ago. And I decided I don't ever want to have to take online traffic. But I'm the only one, that obeys the speed limit going through Jenner. And in the past, I had seen highway patrolmen, you know, parked out of, you know, out of sight if you're around the curve, but so you can see them. And that's very effective.
Maybe we should get a cutout.
Yeah.
You seem to do that at Leggett.
Yeah.
They park a car, that's patrol car there, you can.
Yeah, just an old one that no one's driving anymore, just put it there.
It is the goal. It's like me.
Those flashing signs, I think are pretty effective because I've noticed in general, since the flashing signs have gone in, that people are better.
Yes,
A lot better.
yes, I slowed down.
Can I save my broadband question till staff report?
Yes,
Okay.
I have all this broadband stuff.
Just one other thing on the signage, if we've had a lot of accidents and close calls from cell phone usage. And if they could include, you know, hang out and drive kind of signs, just gonna line people out here.
Yeah, we can get you some, because TPW made some that are specifically like, don't text and drive or hang up or it's not worth it or do different things. And so I mean, we could bring them to the fire station and you all could put them out in the areas that are the worst if you want to do that. Can we do that?
That's great.
There you go.
Okay.
Those
All right.
little,
Yeah, so a little more, if they put it in drivers, like, oh, that's different,
Yeah.
it's not just a standard, and that was actually why they made it, so they made some that looked like not government signs, but they're government signs, so that people actually pay attention, and so they work until people steal them.
Maybe we could budget that with the cell towers.
So one more on Chancellor Ranch, is that gonna be, it's the budding Carrington Ranch, as I understand it? Are those gonna be like one part, or is that gonna be two separate parts?
Technically sort of two separate parks, and I think, but I mean, ultimately, right, you would have master plans that could potentially provide like a limited connectivity between them. But likely with sort of separate access points, right, in terms of lots. So, but I will say that, you know, our goal it is like looking at, you know, the tour, Monterey Redwoods property, like ultimately, we want to actually connect Monterey to the coast through Willow Creek and have kind of a place where you could literally have people, you could go backpacking for a week, right? And go from campground to campground, you could commute down the river and then hike to the coast. So the goal is really greater connectivity for those who want to get lost in the backcountry, but then have, you know, not literally lost, but figuratively lost. Right? We don't want everyone to be coming after them, but then have like, you know, more sort of access for just day hikers and more casual hikers available at all those locations.
All right, any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's see, moving on. We moved past item 9 and on to item 10, which is a consideration of a letter in support of AB 817. So I want to thank staff's help on researching and drafting up some of the verbiage for the letter, and Carolyn's help on some amendments. This is a piece of legislation in the technically right now that would allow us to do all Zoom meetings again. We wouldn't necessarily have to do the Zoom meetings, so we could still do in-person meetings, which I think in many ways they, you know, I think a lot of people like the in-person, but we could say in November when the days are short and the commute is hard, when we don't have this nice 7:30 sun, it is much perhaps safer to do a all Zoom meeting. So that this legislation will enable us to do that going forward. I know I appreciated that, and I know if there's anybody else that had any thoughts about the letter.
I have a factual question about the AB 817 itself. And I read this flyer and our letter, and it appeared that the only thing I got out of it was that you wouldn't have to any longer publish the offsite location where an offsite person was, which is good. But it doesn't say that this would permit people on the council to meet remotely as often as they want to. Did I miss that? And is that part of this? Because the regulations that we're under now, we can only attend remotely 2 meetings a year, and we have to say that we're sick.
I can answer that, Brian.
Go ahead.
So the traditional rules for Brown Act before the pandemic did allow a council member to participate remotely, but they had to publish the address of the location that they were in the agenda. And they had to allow public to come in and participate at that site. So you could go to a community center and do that. Or if you were traveling, you know, a hotel room or your house. This would make it so that your address doesn't need to go on the agenda, and at any time, a council member would be able to participate remotely.
Okay.
Without cause. And without a restriction of 2.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
And without a restriction of being in the state of California.
I believe so, yes. I think you still would need to have a quorum in California.
You have a quorum, but if you were somewhere else in the world, you could, and you were a member, you could participate if, as long as a quorum was present in California. Because of remotely, you would still be in California. Some people could be remotely in California. That's how I understood it.
Okay, thank you.
So
That's good news.
Would your intention, Brian, be to utilize this, to schedule all remote and occasional all remote meeting or regular all remote?
So Debbie, maybe is that possible?
That would be possible.
Okay, so personally, I think it would be a good idea for some of, like, say, our November meeting. Where, you know, the day is, where it's gonna be dark by, you know, 5:30 or 6, so that folks wouldn't have to drive, you know, either from Sea Ranch to Bay.
And January.
Yeah, January, correct,
Yes.
yeah.
So,
So 2 out of 6 meetings will be Zoom.
and the other's hybrid.
Well, I mean, that would be up to, you know, whoever's chair next, or, yes, I think that would be.
And hybrid meetings are not effective, right?
So we can still do hybrid meetings, it would just enable us to do, for members to be able to do those, but, and we would still.
So like if we did a hybrid meeting, if this passes, somebody like that wouldn't have to read that statement.
Correct,
Okay.
yes. Yes. Okay, so are there any questions about the letter specifically?
Yeah.
Okay, so, if there's any, do we want to move forward with moving that, or? Oh, yes. Does anybody in the public would like to comment? Okay. All right, so.
Question,
Sure.
is anyone on this board, feeling like there is something that could be lost in not having, full-time face-to-face meetings?
So I think, so this is a sort of having gone through this over the last couple of years, and Scott's actually had done both.
I did 2 years at Zoom, right from the beginning of COVID, for 2 years, and we missed being together, but we functioned very well, I think.
Yeah.
With the Zoom or without
I
the Zoom?
think,
With the Zoom?
I think both have their advantages. So I think, when we were all Zoom, I think it did enable people who wouldn't have had the opportunity to attend because the meeting would have been in Sea Ranch. People in Bodega Bay wouldn't have attended. And so prior to COVID, we were all in person and there wasn't the opportunity to do this. So this would enable us to do, you know, have the option to be able to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I also have been here from the beginning. So we had 2 years when we did it all in person, and then we had COVID. And I noticed that we had more attendance from the public in the Zoom world. A lot more attendance from the public, which was very gratifying. So I would support staying with hybrid.
Yeah.
Well, at a minimum.
But my question was really related to the board itself. Was the change in policy that you're considering affecting the board meeting face to face?
I think that Marty not having to travel to Bodega Bay in January from Sea Ranch is important to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
So vice versa.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
So I'd like to address this if that's all right. I very much enjoyed having the in-person meeting. It was very lively. We made connections. It was really good. But just as Scott was just saying, I think that being considering the distance some people have to travel in the bad weather, it's a great exchange. I'd much rather have people be safe and pick up those public personal interactions when it's just more appropriate to do so weather wise and sun wise. I miss not being there tonight, but I still feel that good work is being done.
You're here in the room.
Yeah.
I also want to mention, if I can, that we actually already had to cancel a Lower Russian River MAC meeting this year due to weather and flooding. And had we had a MAC meeting in January, certainly for the coast, certainly would have had to do the same. And we actually were all texting at like 10 o'clock last night, and Debbie was frantically trying to get in contact with the principal to find out whether we could actually meet here because school was closed today because of the septic failure. So this would also provide us with like the ability to have a backup plan, you know, which I think could be really positive for us in the future. And I do think that there's value in face-to-face, but we could pick the good weather months to have something like, you know, in-person focused meetings or in-person focused meetings that are of particular concern to a particular community, right? Because we did that actually when we first rolled out the map, we tried to visit each community and hear from them about their issues. But in general, I just want you all to stay safe and not have to worry about only having 2 outs a year for, you know, kind of an emergency situation, or it gets complicated beyond that. The current law is bizarre.
Yeah, this is about, that's clearly.
All right, so, there's no other comments, does anyone want to move to?
So I move that we send this letter.
Okay, a
I
second,
second is third.
so I think we need to,
Who was the second?
Scott.
Scott, okay.
All right, so, I think we need to vote.
Take a roll call vote. Representative Campbell,
Yes.
Representative Macaulay,
Yes.
Representative Madden,
Yes.
Representative Farmer,
Aye.
Representative Lippett,
Yes.
Representative Brazoni,
Yes.
Representative Nichols,
Yes.
and Chair Leubitz.
Yes.
The motion passes.
All right, moving on to Lisa's staff report.
Okay. I want to check in with you guys on roads. We had a hillside slide in Jenner on during winter storms. And it was an intriguing situation because there was water pipes in the right of way where the slide was happening. And it actually is going to end up solving a lengthy problem, because in order to fix the problems of the water pipe, we needed to also repave the road. So because the hill slid and SoCo Public Infrastructure is going to be repaving the road, it means that we also now can fix the water problem at the same time. So there's a good thing coming to Jenner because of the winter storms by accident. That will, we'll have to get environmental permitting and the other things, but that will be done in the 2024 repaving project. So I just wanted to really let you guys know that. We do have Fort Ross Road planned for 2024 paving. I know you covered a lot of the roads in the last meeting, but we have had some questions since then. So I just wanted to cover some of these big spots again. We also have Skag Springs road also all the way to Kishaya happening in that as well. That list of all the PPP roads was in the last meeting, so you can go back and look at that in notes. We did have some questions about the Fort Ross. We have had a new slip out. That one was accepted by FEMA, but so there are two Fort Ross slip outs, one from 2019 and one from this year. They're both FEMA projects, which means they're proceeding at FEMA pace. So we're on them. We're working on it. It's planned. I can't give you any dates. I can't tell you anything more beyond that.
Is that the Fort Ross Road that goes to Panadero? Or
Yeah.
one that goes-
Yeah.
So the slip out is where it's gonna be paved. Does that affect the timing of the paving? Are you gonna wait till it's repaired before paving?
We were just talking about this before the meeting. We should probably talk to Johannes and Janice.
We will make every effort.
Well,
I
you
can't,
know,
yeah.
Yeah.
it's like they paint the center line.
There may be,
line
there may be
later,
some
they pave it.
adaptations to this based on the situation with FEMA. The challenge is that since they don't ever give us firm information, it's really difficult to make decisions. So we make some decisions and sometimes we have to change those as we go.
We did do that for Cause Highway, if you recall. We ended up holding the paving until the FEMA project was complete so that it would all kind of happen at the same time.
Yeah. On the issue of that Linda brought up about the economic development and the Bodega Bay and the coast in general, there is an organization called the Sonoma Mendocino Economic Development District, and we've become quite active in the work they're doing. What they're looking to do is to figure out some larger economic development projects, and one of them that pertains to the fishermen and to the coast in particular is, they have a goal of using they have a blue strategy and a green strategy. The blue strategy is supporting the industries that are along the coast that are by the blue. And a big piece of that is, the commercial fishermen's industry and the recreational industry along the coast. So we're participating in those conversations and in those meetings, and with that in mind, I'm going to be setting up some meetings. We're going to be setting up some meetings to talk about some possible projects along that area. One of the intriguing things that came up, and this plan, their SMEDD plan is online, and I'll send you guys the link. You can Google the SMED Economic Development Plan. It is online. One of the intriguing things that has come up is some of the projects that were started and then not finished. So, for example, in Bodega Bay, there's this amazing pier build, which was supposed to be tied to a dry dock facility, and that would bring a whole economic boom to the area. They built this $1 million pier, but they never put in the dry dock facility. So there are some intriguing issues here that we're uncovering in this process that we'll have a lot more to report. We just opened this door this last month, so I'm just letting you know that we're looking at this, and we'll be having discussions and presentation on some of this economic development issues going forward. Is this a district a separate public agency, or is it a joint?
JPA.
Okay. Yeah, between Sonoma and Mendocino, and that helps us quite a bit because federal dollars go towards economically disadvantaged districts. Mendocino is quite economically disadvantaged, so joint projects that we do that involve, involve Mendocino in any way increases our opportunities as well to do economic development in Sonoma, because we are economically higher as a county than many other places. So,
and broadband is part of it too, just to mention.
and broadband is part of that too. So moving on to broadband, we've got a lot going on right now. Access Sonoma Broadband is our big broadband project. There's a lot of money going into it from the state and federal area. At the same time, it's super frustrating how slow this is. Because we're not only talking about just the physical need to get fiber out to, or connectivity out to all these places. We haven't even gotten to that. We have to sit there and do plans and, make up. We've created a relationship with Golden State Connect, which is working on trying to figure out how to get the middle mile. So all this is happening. Scott was at the equity broadband meeting. I was at the equity broadband meeting, and Margaret was there as well. Sure, I saw you. Another meeting. Anyway, it was Lisa Nansen from the River Mac. So we're participating in the conversations and in the planning. Sonoma County has received a $490,000, something like that, grant in order to participate in this project. At the same time, there are some things we aren't willing to wait. We have people that need this, right, and need it now. So there are a couple things going on. We have the free Wi-Fi project happening, and I wanted to give you an update on that. I have the timing here. So June 5th and 6th, they're going to be putting the free Wi-Fi in Cazadero. June 7th, they're going to be doing Bodega. June 8th and 9th, they're going to be installing in Bodega Bay, and June 10th in Jenner. The idea behind this project, the free public Wi-Fi project, is that we have a disaster resilient hub within a community, so that first of all, on a day-to-day basis, now when you drive through Guerneville, there is free public Wi-Fi, so you can stop people. Kids can access and do their homework from the plaza if they want to. People who need to check their messages and don't have connectivity at home know that they can get it in Guerneville. So these downtowns will have a hub spot where they know they can get Wi-Fi. More importantly, or even as important, it means that during disasters or problems, we will have greater resiliency. So in the recent winter storms in Guerneville, we lost a couple nodes, but for the most part, that Wi-Fi stayed up, which meant that we had a whole area that we could connect to and communicate with, and where disaster workers could communicate. So it's not as good as this big access broadband project that's planning to get out to everybody in, I don't know how many years, but it gives us something, a disaster resilient way that people can get online. So one of the fascinating pieces about this is we ran into a big barrier in that, I don't know if you guys for you, we ran into a big barrier in that you can't get funding for free public Wi-Fi unless you're a library. And so we've been able to get, Linda funded the first. No.
We don't have a letter.
And so, so we've been beating ourselves against against this rule. We've been talking with legislators trying to change the rule. We've been going, how can we get this changed? How can we rephrase things? How can we write up grants with the CPUC so we can do this? And then suddenly sitting in this equity meeting last month, I was like, why don't we just call ourselves a library? And so yeah, Sonoma Public Library and said, hey, could we just combine up with you guys and say we're going to create digital access to the library, and it's now a library project? And they said, absolutely yes. So now we're going to try to extend this project in the funding by creating a digital library in the places that are hard to reach in order to expand the free public Wi-Fi. Can't make promises, we still have to go out and get money, but we're working very hard on it and very innovatively. The other thing is so I'd like to talk to you offline about how to be sure we get some coverage in Annapolis. Yes, and Annapolis doesn't hire us downtown. They don't have a downtown, which is a school, or that's what we were thinking, is using the school. Yeah, so we can, well, you could call the school library, I'm sure they have one.
Absolutely. Pop-up libraries too.
They also
The
have
library
self-
bins.
Yep, digital library,
Very
well,
well,
and the mobile. They said as
Library.
long as it provides access to the public library, they feel like that suits their mission. So we're gonna go out and go get some money now based on that. We've set up a meeting in a couple of weeks. We're gonna work on that.
And that's a reminder how this started actually with a conversation between, I think it was Elise and Brian and me, and we just so Brian Hughes, who kind of started this whole effort, was originally funded in Guerneville through Tourism Impact Fund. And he applied for our American Rescue Plan Act funding from the federal government and got several $100,000 of county specific funding. And then this is kind of looking at what is the next tranche. And I've already been contacted by like a Cloverdale City Councilor who wants this contact information. Like everyone wants this now that we're doing it. So it's just really cool. This was started by a West County local, like in West County, and now it's going countywide, and the library partnership is awesome. So
It was started by you. You said, if I had some money, what would be the best thing we could do?
So it's a mesh network, so it's very local, and you're not gonna stream your Netflix at home on this. But it's real critical for providing a baseline emergency service and for people that are on foot.
Yeah, we do ask you all to help us with something. The money for broadband and where the lines are gonna go first depends on where there are gaps in services. We know that their maps are insufficient. And because they do something, they do their maps by census tract. So anyone in the entire census tract has connectivity, they say that census tract has connectivity. So if somebody in your census tract has Starlink, they declare the whole damn thing is covered, which it isn't. So we really need to get good information in. I asked you all to go and Google Access Sonoma Broadband. And on that page, there is a digital equity survey. Take the digital equity survey at Access Sonoma Broadband. Every single person, share that with everybody in your neighborhood, send it out to your networks and to all your people. Take the survey at Access Sonoma Broadband. Because if you go in and say, we don't have service here, that will correct that map. So we need everybody to go take that survey. Yes, Bill?
So I don't, a lot of people in my area, near ranches, I mean, we have satellites, but they are so inadequate.
Yeah.
So it's like you do have broadband, but try to make a phone call, it doesn't get broadband, try to, you know, I mean, it's inadequate. And lots of people that would like to work there from home, have a home office, are really frustrated because they can't really get the connectivity. So it would be an illusion to say that we're all connected because we all have satellites, but we're very unhappy.
Right, let's
Don't feel
give
good for
them as much real information as we can.
About the, they're gonna look at the, granularity. CPUC recognizes that these zones and one person has it, the whole zone has it. They understand that problem and they're gonna break out the granularity, and by giving them information, like you suggested, helps that. And I believe the federal, grants look at, they start out looking at it, including satellite, but they're going to filter that out when it comes to issuing grants.
Yeah.
So.
There's one more thing about the roads that I wanted to talk to you guys about. Last year, we paid TOT funds for enhanced parking enforcement during the season. So from Memorial Day to Labor Day, we had a contract with CHP for better parking enforcement. I feel confident saying that the number of emails complaining about parking issues in Bodega Bay and along the coast and along the river went way down when we had that program. It is time for us to renew that contract. I'd like to get feedback from you guys. Do you agree with us? Do we need to keep that going this year? Do we need to pay for that again? It was about $16,000 from the coastal TOT.
Is that from Jenner's job?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's a good program. I think it's worth continuing it. This last weekend was very nice, and there were issues. There were parking issues.
Okay, I would like to say that I know that Jenner, you don't have that. It's not a big issue. I mean, we do have parking limits, but where people have creatively parked does not seem to be a nuisance. And I do know that down at the Russian Gulch Beach, there's often inadequate parking, so people park along the side of the road, which is really harmless. But the CHP was ticketing them, and people had a beautiful day at the beach, and they came back to their cars to find that they had tickets. It didn't seem like you needed to extend this program all the way to Russian Gulch Beach, because it really doesn't present a problem to the community.
So this is part 2 of the question, which is now that we have this program possible, this kind of feedback is really helpful. We can tell the CHP officers, skip that, but really focus here, and let them know.
Yeah.
So I will make a note that Russian Gulch Beach does not need it. And as you guys find, tell your people, say, where are we having parking problems, so we can feed them that information throughout the season. Yes.
I have a question about the improving the parking area for Salmon Creek Beach and what options may exist there. People do park all over near Route 1 and the cliffs, and it's just a matter of time before more problems happens. I had heard at some point something about perhaps parking being extended to the ranger station, but I don't know if that was a serious proposal or not.
Now, one of the things that we run into quite a bit, and Scott is always talking about the need for us to pressure. We have actually had conversations with Senator McGuire and with the head of state parks, but we have a lot of state parks along the coast, and we have no control, and we have no, we cannot affect that. So Salmon Creek is a state park. We'll let them know. They are hideously underfunded. What happened? Help me with the dates, Scott. You're going to know this.
2008.
It was like in 2008 when the recession hit, that they took our budget, the budget for this for state parks down to, they used to have 6 rangers, and now they only have 2.
They finally brought 1 back, right?
1, 2, the budget in general for state parks in this area has plummeted and has never been fully recovered. And as a result, we have horrible problems. We have emergency services they're trying to cover for this lack of help at state parks. We have, we have no enforcement. We have, problems with paving. We have problems with parking lots being closed. We have problems with services. We have problems with all these things because state parks are inadequately funded. So, we would suggest that you send letters to Senator McGuire and say, why hasn't, we keep talking about how much cash the state of California has. Why are they failing to give us the services that we desperately need? And you had your hand up for the longest time.
I had just to park, Hamlin's on the coast, that should be included because when it's really hot or a really popular day, people park across the white fog line, and then you've got bicyclists coming and people are passing. I mean, it's a difficult drive on weekends.
Okay, I'll make sure that that's on the list of the enforcement area. I think you had your hand up next. I'm trying to.
On the same point, and this is for the state parks. If Senator McGuire can get him to work with Caltrans, they took out hundreds and hundreds of loads when they're doing their realignment. What's happening in those parking lots, for example, in Salmon Creek, is there's been so much erosion, these small cars can't get off it. But they could use that fill to build these up. So a lot of the small cars, what they do is they'll put their left wheels on the highway 1. Because if they take it out, they can't get on, and if they try and jump it, they scrape, or it's a traffic hazard. But we could use Caltrans, and they just took out, and I'm watching the watch, they just took about 20 loads in this last week. They're just not part of this.
What I haven't required is the agencies to actually talk to each other. They really not gonna happen.
That's what
We have a lot of trouble. What I'm wondering though is, what we found when we go to any agency is, quixotic reports are not as effective as, do we want an ad hoc that will, try to get a report of that section of the coast of where we have problems, so we can say, here we have 10 problem areas, we want you to address this. Is this something that you guys would like to take on? Do you want to volunteer?
I was thinking put up signs. Salmon Beach on the pops.
I mean, that's a question of providing good input and then our putting some strength behind it. So.
And what we found was actually really effective with Caltrans. Remember, we did this after one of the, I think, MAC meetings in Bodega Bay, was actually taking them for a tour, making them come out and then taking them for a tour of the worst areas. And then they actually did go through and fix it. So maybe it could be like, we form an ad hoc to identify the challenges, and then we invite state parks to actually participate in a MAC meeting, and then have some kind of a tour where we go and take them on, and give them a road show.
They are going to shut down about 300 yards on the coast of what used to be the coastal highway. What are they going to do with that material? There's a lot of good aggregate that could go to Salmon Beach and some of these other trails. Rather than.
Can I comment on that really quick? The what's happening with all of the spoils of the project. So my understanding is when they submit the bid for that contract, the contractors themselves then take on the responsibilities for those spoils, and they then usually have those already out to another market. So I like the idea that those are used, the aggregate, all of that is used locally, but that requires planning ahead to do so. Sadly, you can't just ask them to move it.
Thank you for that input. I really appreciate it. Now, I think Margaret.
The question of state parks generally, in all sorts of areas I'm coming across, how can we form a better relationship with them? Because out on the coast, they're such a big player in so many ways, and they're not at the table. And so I hear that you guys are going and talking to them, but is there a way that these relationships can be
Yeah, I'll just be super candid. I mean, there are sort of better and there are more effective and less effective, or more interested and less interested people, right? Who wind up in leadership positions in terms of collaboration. You know, for instance, we were just talking about the sheriff. That transition has been fantastic, because now we have someone that we can work with that, you know, wants to work with us, that wants to collaborate and come to the table in that spirit. And unfortunately, we don't really have that leadership at state parks right now. Our best relationships are with like Brendan O'Neill, you know, like folks who sort of are on the ground and live in West County, but are lower down the food chain.
Yeah.
At some point, we will have a change in leadership, and I actually kind of heard that might be coming up, you know, at some point in the not too distant future, that the current sort of leader for this district retires, then maybe we'll get someone who's like super excited and a go-getter, and we can hit the ground running and make as much progress as we can until that person promotes that. You know, it's the same thing with PvP. We get someone that we're, you know, it's just,
That's
kind
really
of
good
come and go.
information, because it means that, you know, I want to try and bash my head against a brick wall.
That's kind of, yeah.
So, okay, we'll just accept that this is what it is now.
And do what you can with like Brendan O'Neill, who's done great work on vegetation management and like fire, you know, risk reduction, and yeah, we found the people who make things happen.
So, yeah, that's great information. Maybe we can do something about it ad hoc. Consider that.
Yes, sir.
The MAC wrote a letter to McGuire and Woods about this topic. Did we ever get a
It was a
response?
couple of years ago. No, we don't.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is how long.
It
we get a
was in
response?
the January, but my understanding, we've not.
That's not unusual.
That is disappointing now.
Well, when, we got an email response from Mike McGuire's office the next day,
It was
saying
Yeah.
that it was received, and don't worry, we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
We can follow up.
Yeah.
I know he's a busy guy. I know he wants to do the right thing. So maybe having him at the MAP meeting, we can make this a focus.
Yeah.
Thank you. There may be, some pressure that could be applied to this interface with state parks and the counties. And that's that, and that you perhaps should include your legal department, but that would include a part of that interface, the rationale for establishing that functional interface is that we share a common goal there, and that's control of risk of fire. And anyone, for instance, certainly us local, who are familiar with the amount of debris, although there's some local work going on right now, the amount of debris that is down in state parks is just, I mean, for those of us who are familiar with it, I mean, it is a real hazard.
It's staggering.
And so I'm suggesting to you that there may be some teeth behind establishing, some legal teeth behind establishing. There.
It's an excellent point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, there is work being done, but it's a small percentage to the problem. To the
Really puts the strain on the fire department. I mean, our district, 35% of our district is county and state parks. And the majority of the calls are tourist related. So it really needs to be taken care of. And the state, they're just not doing it. I go down to, well, we were there at this mill. I mean, well, no, it was, the other one, yeah.
South Point.
Yeah, I mean, it's just atrocious. They closed that one, campground because of the dead trees.
And it's our local taxpayer dollars that are providing that fire department support for out of town.
And we get nothing from the state for our fire department.
Could I pose my broadband question?
Yes, of course, sorry.
It seems that the Economic Development Board is focused on making existing service more affordable, equipping users, and teaching the how to. Fiber in the ground seems to be backburnered for the foreseeable future. Am I correct in that sense? That the Economic Development Board is really more focused toward getting existing services affordable, which is a good thing.
No, I don't think so.
You think they're treating fiber in the ground?
I think
with
that
equal
they are.
priority?
I think that it's a big lift.
Yeah.
But they're putting a lot of time into this relationship with Golden State Connect. You would know
Yeah.
much more about this.
I can just say that I had the sort of same impression, and so, really grilled, Ethan Brown about this, and we also raised some alarms about the SMED, SEDS, so many acronyms, that right, Sonoma, Mendocino Economic Development District, and then their, what is it, Economic Development Strategy, something, I don't know what the C stands for, whatever. But they did prioritize things like, increasing sort of the speed in Santa Rosa for municipal services. And we're like, wait a second, before we improve already great service in the urban area, could we please get some connections up on the North Coast? And it sounded like they were just trying to create an everything document and allow cities to submit projects, but the county's priority does remain sort of middle mile that will extend services to rural underserved areas and really trying to make it countywide. So what are the priorities in West County and East County and North County? South County, Central really doesn't need much. So yeah, I think that is the intent.
And in the way the county thinks about this, I'm hoping and praying that the county doesn't think and the area is served if one family has no.
That's being really looked different.
Agree 1,000%.
That's right. They're looking at it very with granularity.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's really problematic.
So you have a firm hand on the tiller.
And we're there agitating every.
We are. We're just having with Ethan.
One of us is in there, it's like.
Yeah. We're sort of a battering ram between the two of us. That's how we get things done. We just keep hammering on it.
Right.
It doesn't, we can't get past FEMA, but anyways.
Was there anything?
There was a public comment submitted online,
Oh, okay.
written. Would you like me to
Sure,
read it? And this goes back to when we were talking about speeding and roads in general, from Suki Waters. Can we get rumble strips just north of the Rivers End Restaurant in Jenner heading south? The first 25-mile-per-hour speed tracker is not as you come into town, but just before you hit the straight residential section of the road, and cars come flying around the corner in front of Rivers End, which should be no more than 15 miles per hour. We wish the 20-mile-per-hour sign was before the restaurant as well as you head north.
Debbie, could you forward that to
I
my
can.
email? We'll look into it.
That would be a Caltrans thing, but we can definitely relay that.
Maybe another slide that reads.
All right, anything else? Okay, well, we'll be able to get out of here with some light still to drive home. So I believe that is all for our agenda. If we have a motion to adjourn, we can do so.
What agenda items?
Oh, yes, so if anybody has any agenda items for the future, please contact, send me an email.
Any of us?
Yes, it's in any of your local macro.
Okay, move to adjourn.
Okay. I need to, okay,
And we don't have to vote.
okay, yes, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it.